Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Your Overseas Home webinar. Today, we will be covering everything that you need to know about visas and about healthcare before making your move to France. My name's Hannah, and I'm one of the team here at Your Overseas Home. As you may know, we as a business have been helping buyers with their property purchases and their relocation plans for over 10 years now. We aim to help you avoid pitfalls and really enjoy the process and make it as cost effective and as efficient as possible for you. Now, we've been hearing in the news this week that some travel restrictions are lifting. The COVID situation does seem to be improving, certainly here in the UK, and we do expect to see a surge in demand for overseas property this summer. So we're really excited to have you all with us and help you on that buying and relocation journey. Now, today I've got two experts here with us to share their insight and knowledge on visas and healthcare. First up, you'll hear from Catherine Bryan of Expat Partners. Now, Catherine is an immigration specialist working on a large number of applications, particularly since Brexit, and she's here to talk you through all the sort of different rules and regulations and give you a bit of an insight into the visa process. And then after Catherine, you'll hear from Jeremy Wolf of Medissurance. Now, Jeremy's worked in the field of insurance for a number of years now. He's got a wealth of expertise and contacts, and he's here to help you navigate this tricky process of understanding what you need in terms of your health cover when you're making your move. We hope to answer as many of your burning questions and queries as we can today. And for those of you listening in live, if you've got a particular question that you want to ask, do type that question in at the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. And after we've heard from the speakers, I'll get as many of those questions answered for you. We estimate we'll take around 45 to 50 minutes for today's session. So sit back, get your cup of tea at the ready, and without further ado, I will hand over to Catherine. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks very much, Hannah, for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope you're all doing well. So my name is Catherine Byrne. I work with Expat Partners. We are an immigration consultancy firm with our head office in Paris. We have an office in Tours in France and also in India and China. So today I'm going to be bringing you through the different procedures that may be applicable to your situation, and particularly for those of you who are hoping to move to France in the future, or indeed if you have already a home in France, and the different applications that you may be eligible for. So that's our introduction. Thank you. I've been living in France and Germany, and my background is in immigration law, and I've been working with Expat Partners for a few months now. So I'm going to be bringing you through two different categories of situations and the different procedures that go along with them. So the first category is category A, which applies to British nationals who are settled in France prior to the 31st of December 2020. And those individuals may be eligible for a residence permit under the withdrawal agreement. So the second category is for British nationals who are coming to France after this date, so from the 1st of January 2021, and also the different exemptions and procedures for people who are traveling for less than 90 days within a 180-day period. And then I'll also bring you through for the applications for those who are traveling for more than 90 days. So for category A, there is an online portal whereby you can apply for a residence permit under the withdrawal agreement. So this process is online, and it must be completed by the 30th of June 2021. So it's coming up soon, this deadline. And the requirement, the French authorities are saying that anyone who has been resident in France or has been settled in France prior to the 31st of December 2021 must have a residence permit by the 30th of October of this year. So these residence permits will allow you to have the same EU rights within France only, not within other EU member states, but within France only. So that means that if you have this permit, you can set up a business, you can work in France, and you can access the social security system here. So there are two different categories. So if you have been living or settled in France for more than 5 years, you will be eligible for a 10 years residence permit. And if you've been here for less than 5 years, a 5 years residence permit will be issued. And we really do kind of emphasize that this is a one-time shot, that it really is, given the rights that go along with it and how simple the procedure is for this residence permit, and the little amount of documentation that is required, we really do encourage people to look into this because of the fact that a residence permit for either 5 years or 10 years will be issued, and that will avoid having to apply for long stay visas, which will need to be renewed each year. So the documentation that is required is for more than 5 years. If you can prove that you've been here for more than 5 years, there are just 3 documents, like your passport, a proof of address for the date that you settled in France, so that will be more than 5 years prior to the 31st of December, and a proof of address for 2020. So that will be a utility bill, internet bill, something similar like that, or a tax return form, something like that. So if you've been here for less than 5 years, the documentation is a bit more, there's a bit more required in terms of documentation, and that depends on your situation, whether you are self-employed, whether you're retired and have sufficient means. So there's a bit more in the way of documentation there. So we move on to category B for British nationals coming to France after the 31st of December 2020. So just to note that the travellers to France and the EU can still come here for less than 90 days during a 180-day period, and you do not require a visa if you are coming for that amount of time, for less than 90 days. So this applies to business travellers or indeed a tourist. And that is 90 days within the 180-day period, includes all travel to the Schengen countries. Then, of course, if you are moving to France for over 90 days, so if you're considering buying property here, as Hannah set out, then a long stay visa will be required. So that will also depend on the person's activities. So if someone is moving to France to work here, then there are different requirements and different work permits that are necessary, and there are also lots of different categories which may apply, which are called talent passports, which may apply if you fall into a certain category of setting up a business, or if you are renowned for a certain trade or artistic skill or something like that, and that you'll be issued with a residence permit, and the length of validity for that residence permit varies from the different types of permits. Thank you very much. So I've included my contact details here, as well as the contact details of our Managing Director, Fiona Mugno. So of course, if you have any questions during this session, I'll be very happy to answer them. And otherwise, please do feel free to contact us if you have any further queries, or we are very happy to assist you if you would like us to manage your applications as well. Thanks, Hannah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Catherine. That was a really great start for us. We certainly do have some questions, as I expected, coming in from our listeners today. First off, I wanted to ask if you've got any advice for families who perhaps part of the family, they're British citizens, but they are currently resident in France. They currently have the appropriate residency permits that they need for living in France. Some of their family are still based here in the UK. Can their family join them? Do their family have to go through that process? If you can just sort of give us a bit of an insight how that might work, that'd be great.
Certainly. So under the withdrawal agreement, there is an applicant. You can apply for a residence permit if you can prove a link with a British national who is living in France. So, for example, in terms of documentation, what would be required is perhaps your marriage certificate, a birth certificate proving the link with the British national who is already a French resident here. And then depending on, so that's for under the withdrawal agreement. So that was the first category I spoke about. And then with regards to the other categories, if you, for example, if you are coming to France this year and you are setting up a business, then there will be a different, it depends on each category of visa. And I won't go into all the different types because the different rules are different for each. But in some cases, it can be automatic that the family can come, and in others, there requires a separate application.
Thank you. And for people asking that question, do get in touch with Catherine and her team about your specific requirements, because as Catherine highlighted there, it might differ depending on the different family structure, but that's a great insight. Thank you. Now we've got some real international listeners today. So the majority of our customers are usually based in the UK, but we've got some US customers, we've got some Australian customers and some Canadian customers all joining us and listening in today. So welcome from wherever in the world you are. Are the processes the same regardless of what country you're applying from, or have you sort of talked in the context of Brits there? Could you just explain for some of our international listeners? That'd be great.
Of course. So the first category A, under the Brexit withdrawal agreement, is only for Brits who are in France already. So that won't apply to the US or Canadian or Australian listeners. And then as opposed for other countries, there are some different bilateral agreements between different countries. But generally, if, for example, a person is hoping from the US, for example, is hoping to come to France, then a long stay visa would be required, and that requires going to your local French consulate and applying for the long stay visa from there.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks for that. Now we've had a question in from a customer, Jack, who's listening in this morning. He said that in his relationship, one spouse has a European passport, they're a European citizen, and the other spouse doesn't. How does that work if you're married to somebody with a European passport? Does that make things easier?
So hi Jack, and welcome. Thanks for your question. So in France, you can apply for a residence permit as a conjoint de son citoyen européen. So that's as a spouse of a European citizen. In terms of documentation, it can be quite heavy depending on where the person comes from. So yes, it is. So in short, yes, it is possible to apply for a residence permit. I would say that if you are eligible under the first category of having previously settled in France, I would think that applying under the withdrawal agreement is much simpler in terms of documentation and in terms of the length of the permit. For example, if you can get a 10-year permit automatically, then I would advise going with that. But certainly you can apply as a spouse of an EU citizen in France for a residence permit, and the documentation will differ a bit depending on country of origin and particular circumstances, whether you're working, whether you're reliant on your spouse, different things like that. But yes, you can, Jack.
Wonderful, thank you. Now we've had a question from Wendy who just wanted to clarify. So she understands it that when she's planning to move to France, she'll require 3 visas. So she's asking, will she need a long stay visa, a work permit, and a residency permit? Will she need all 3 of those bits of documentation?
So it will depend on the exact situation, and if you're applying to work here. So generally, the work permit authorization will be acquired by your employer. So in terms of it's not that you hold all 3 at the one time, but it's just that the process of getting to the residence permit as an employee in France requires, yes, applying for a long stay visa in order to come to France, then for your employer to apply for the work authorization permit, and then once you are in France and you have that authorization, then you can go to your local préfecture, which will then issue your residence permit. So it's not so much that you hold all 3 at the one time, but rather that it's the process of obtaining the eventual residence permit, that there are 2 steps before it. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and certainly for the specific requirements, again, I will just reiterate that where it's sort of particularly specific, your questions, certainly do get in touch with Catherine and Fiona and the team at Expat Partners, because they will be able to answer, the more nuanced questions about your particular requirements. Now, a few questions have come in about sort of proving wealth and proving how much money you've got in the bank. And we do know that quite a number of our customers are looking to retire to France, so they perhaps don't have a sort of steady monthly income coming in at the moment, but they do have savings and money in the bank. Can you sort of tell us a little bit more about how they might go about proving what wealth they have, how much they might need to prove, and also how long would that last, assuming they do maintain that wealth, they maintain the savings account? Is that reassessed every year? How does all of this work? If you can give us a bit of background on that, that'd be great.
Of course. So in terms of the documentation which you could submit, we generally advise that showing a tax return form is the simplest way to show that, because it usually includes all of the details, including various pensions and different things like that. You can submit bank account statements, certainly. Of course, we would advise that that would be the most up-to-date possible. So if you could show, and highlight the date that you, if it's an online account, what date you access it, and different things like that. In terms of, and just in terms of, I suppose, again, for the second part of your question about, proving continuously, that will depend on the type of visa. So I'll just, in terms of under the withdrawal agreement, residence permit, because it is such a new category of permit, because it's born only out of Brexit. We don't know in the future, in 10 years, for example, once the residence permit the validity comes to its end, whether they will in fact come back to ask for more, just because it's kind of a grey area at the moment, to be perfectly honest. And then in terms of other types of visas, if you're setting up a business, or if it's a renewal of a visitor's visa, then it will again depend on the type of visa and the documentation that are required for each category of visa.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. Now I'm going to come back to the work permit question, which Wendy asked earlier. Somebody else has asked what the situation is if they, we're in a working from home world. We're all working from home at the moment, as we were discussing earlier. Can somebody live in France and still work remotely for their UK-based employer? Would they need a work permit because they're technically still working for a UK-based employer? How would that work?
So that would depend. I mean, if you're not employed if you're employed with your UK company and you're applying under the withdrawal agreement, then you would fall into a category of kind of a visitor or working here, but for a foreign employer, in which case you would be required to show documentation from your foreign employer. And the work permit, if you don't mind, I'll double check on that for you, and I can certainly come back. But the work permit generally is just for if you are working in France with a French employer.
Thank you. I'll make sure that we connect up the person who asked that question, or anybody who asked questions along that line. I'll make sure I make the connection for you all with Catherine and her team to get that answered properly. Thank you very much there. Now, obviously, as we know, a lot of our customers are purchasing property, and there's been various different questions come in sort of on this topic. First of all, do people have to start applying for the visas and the permits, depending on which route they're going down? Do they need to start applying before they purchase the property? Are they best to purchase the property and then make the application? Is there any advice you'd have? I know it depends on circumstances, but any sort of advice or indication of what they should do in those circumstances?
It doesn't really it shouldn't make too much of a difference. In terms of for the visitor's visa, excuse me, you generally have to show that you do have some sort of address in France. So that would require a rental agreement of some kind, even if that isn't the property that you're planning to eventually purchase, for example. Just a note on that, Airbnb rentals are generally not accepted by the authorities for proof of rental agreement. Because they consider that it's with a platform and not with a natural person. So on that, I mean, you can certainly come to France to shop around and have a look and show your residence as the rental agreement. There's no, it shouldn't make too much of a difference, but you do generally have to show a residence. It doesn't necessarily have to be the residence the property that you've purchased, but it can be a rental agreement.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That's really helpful, because I know people plan on coming, for sort of an extended stay whilst they're doing their property searching. So really useful for people to have that advice there. Now, a question about holiday property. So we've talked quite a lot in the context of people who are looking to permanently relocate. But if somebody's looking to get a holiday property, but they would like to stay beyond the 90 in 180 days that we've talked about, is that possible with some sort of residency agreement or permit? If they say wanted to spend 5 months in the summer in their holiday home or something, is that doable?
So for people who have arrived as of the 1st of January of this year, a long stay visitor's visa would be required. If you plan to stay more than 90 days within a 180-day period. In terms of if individuals have a holiday home or a second residence in France, and they can prove with documentation that they have acquired that property before the 31st of December 2020, then there is a possibility of applying under the withdrawal agreement, certainly, because in terms of documentation, it's very little. All you have to do is show that the date that you settled and the date that proof of residence in 2020, which if you have a property in France already, that you have a utility bill from 2020, and that in that sense you can also benefit from the withdrawal agreement residency permits.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We've had a lot of questions flying in this morning, and I'm just conscious of the time. I think we've answered most questions on the sort of main topic areas there, but I'm aware that there are people that have still got some specific queries. So thank you all for your questions. I will make sure that we put you in touch with Catherine, and you can follow up and get your detailed queries answered. But I'm conscious of our time this morning, so I'll say thank you to Catherine for now for her expertise. If we've got time at the end, we might circle back to a couple more questions, but I'm conscious that we should move on and get talking about healthcare next. So I would like to hand over to my colleague Jeremy. Now, Jeremy, we're going to do it slightly differently. He's not going to take us through presentation slides, but I do have a few questions and queries I'm going to put to him of our sort of commonly asked questions, and then we will get some of your specific queries answered. So welcome, Jeremy. Now, first of all, I'd like to ask you to kick off and just give us a little bit of background about your experience and about MedAssurance.
Thanks, Hannah. Firstly, in comparison to Catherine, my job is easy. I specialise in private medical insurance in the UK market and the international market. I work with a large number of providers in the market. I'm not biased towards anyone, so I always ensure that you'll always get the best policy and, where possible, the best premium at all times. When it comes to the international market, it's actually it's quite an interesting topic, because there's a big difference between travel insurance and international insurance. And I think sometimes there's a lot of confusion over which policy I should have. Should it be travel or international? And listening to Catherine and the time you stay in those countries, it's very important you choose the right one. So if you're looking, so I just specialize in this field. I don't do anything else but this field. And I work with all countries around Europe, but we're just talking about France today. And France in itself is quite an easy one, because to be able to move to France, you have to show that you are self-sufficient and you're not going to become a a burden on the state, especially for the first few months. So when you're moving to France, you have to show that you are covered with private medical insurance for at least the first 3 months before you can apply for the healthcare system. Now, there are different companies out there which, some will give you policies for the whole of Europe, some will give you just for the UK and France. So you've got to show, and I think I'm right in what I'm saying, and obviously Catherine will be able to confirm this, is that when you apply for a visa, you have to show that you are covered with a private medical insurance policy, and that goes with the application. And you can apply for the healthcare system after you've had your residency for 3 months. Now, what you do with your international policy after that, you can cancel it, but it just gives you that peace of mind knowing you are fully covered when you get there, and especially when you're applying for your visas.
Thanks, Jeremy. That was a really good intro. I do have a few specific questions to put to you on that. A gentleman, Peter, has asked a question this morning saying that he is moving to France with an NHS pension, a state pension, and he just wanted to ask, can he get access to the public funded health cover from day one, or does he definitely need a policy to start with?
You can't apply for the healthcare system until you've been there until you've been a resident for 3 months. That's it. There's no ifs, there's no buts. 3 months, then you can apply. So I always say to the clients, take out the policy. It gives you total peace of mind. Once you've been a resident for 3 months, you can then apply for the healthcare state system.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's great. Now, an interesting question that often comes in, and we talked about it with Catherine there as well. We have some customers who might go over for sort of an extended holiday, maybe 6 to 8 weeks to do their property searching, and find the home that they want to relocate to. Do they need, at what point do they need something beyond, I suppose, a travel insurance policy, for a holiday? At what point would they sort of kick in and need a health insurance policy if they're staying sort of, I suppose, longer than your typical holiday, but they're perhaps not fully relocating yet? Where's the sort of difference between travel and health insurance policies?
The answer is the timeline. Very simple. Different travel insurance policies will give you different stays of travel. Some will give you 30, 45, some will give you up to 120 days, even 180 days for each holiday. Now, if you're going to go over those days, my suggestion is, if you're going to keep going back and forward, again, I keep you going back to that expression, that's peace of mind. If you're going just for 3 weeks, a travel insurance policy is absolutely fine. The difference between the two is very simple. With a travel insurance policy, if you become ill or injured whilst you're abroad, you go to a hospital, you'll see the doctors, and you pay for it, and you claim it back from your insurance company when you're back in the UK, for argument's sake. With an international policy, if you become ill or injured, we speak to the insurance company, they authorize the treatment, the healthcare professional, whether it's the consultant or the hospitals, will send the bills directly to the insurance company who pay it. So if you're there for, say, 30 days for each holiday or each travel period, a travel insurance policy is fine. It's when you go over that time limit. I had a call yesterday from a client who said, I want to go, I'm going for a holiday. I've got a holiday home in the south of France. I go 3 weeks at a time. Do I need an international policy? No, you don't, because each period is 30 days or more. Your travel insurance policy will suffice. It's longer periods that will go over that, which you may need it.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And sorry, I'm going to circle back to the question about the applying after 3 months. A customer, Jack, has asked, is it 3 months from when you step off the plane and you're there, or is it 3 months from actually getting your residency permit, one of the, the different routes that Catherine talked about earlier, or is it 3 months from, being on French soil? Can you just clarify that for us, Jeremy?
It's 3 months from getting your residency, right? So, and that's why when it comes to an international policy, you get off the plane. Now, invariably, you may have the residency before you go. So, but if you don't, it's 3 months from the residency. That's when you can apply for the healthcare system. So
Perfect.
If it takes you 5 or 6 months, that's why having the international policy in place gives you everything you need whilst that takes place. And again, it's something you don't need to worry about whilst you're applying.
Absolutely. Thanks for clearing that up. That really helps. Now, a couple of customers have asked about specific policies. Sorry, I can't speak, about policies relating to age. So we have some customers listening today who are nearly 80. They're asking, do you think that they would face any issues given their age in securing a policy?
No. All international policies are open to all ages. Now, when it comes to applying for a policy, invariably, most providers will ask that you are underwritten, and this is, for me, it's an easy question, but I'll try and explain as quick as I can. When you apply for whether it's a UK policy, French policy, any policy around the world, you have to be underwritten. So you are asked a series of questions. It's about 21 or 22 questions about your conditions, your pre-existing conditions. Whatever you say yes to, you may, I'm not saying you will be, but you may be excluded from those conditions. And that's called full medical underwriting. Other providers, depending on will ask about, may do it on a moratorium, which means that any condition you've had in the last 5 years wouldn't be covered for the first 2 years. But when we get to that stage, I'll go through that process in quite detail because it's very, very important. But invariably, it's done on the full medical underwriting basis, whereby you're asked the questions and you may be excluded from those conditions.
Thank you. And in terms of the insurance providers who you actually go to for quotes, depending on the customer's requirements, how do you go about that process? How many companies would you go to for quotes for a customer?
Normally about 4, maybe 5. But what I tend to do at the very outset, I tend to go to 1 or 2, because in general, the premiums will be very similar across the board. But it's just the additional benefits that the different providers will offer. So I tend to go to 1 or 2, like, for example, Cigna or ALC, which is à la carte, which is a good, nice French company. What I like about Cigna is that they're one of the few companies that will just give you, say, France and the UK, which keeps the cost down, as opposed to giving you the whole of Europe. Now, some clients who travel a lot may want the whole of Europe. They may want to the USA as well. You include the USA and the premium is going to go through the roof. But some clients want that. If it's purely just to get into the country, to get your residency, try and keep the cost down and just have UK and France. And so I tend to go to 2. We look at the premiums. Is that affordable? If it is, great. We then start to narrow it down to exactly what you do need. If there are elements of the policy you don't need, I'll take them out. So, for example, if you don't need dental, that can add 10% to the premium. Let's take it out if you don't want it. We can add an excess to reduce the cost, a bit like car insurance. Higher the excess, lower the premium. We can add different excesses to outpatient and inpatient. But I go through all that with the client once we know roughly whether the premium is affordable and if it's within your budget.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. Now I'm going to ask what I know is going to be quite a difficult question to answer, but can you give us an indication, if we say based on a couple in their 60s who want an annual policy to cover them in France and the UK, can you give a ballpark of what they could sort of expect to pay for something like that? I know that is a tricky one.
It's a very tricky one. No two policies are the same. It's impossible to say. If I look at the UK policy, and I'll start with the UK just for understanding, all UK policies are based on age, postcode, whether you're single, couple. There's the benefits. So, and I come back to what I was saying before. You can have a couple of 62, and let's say the premium is, I don't know, £400 a month, for argument's sake. We can bring that down to 200 by whacking up the excess. So to say, is there a fixed figure? The answer is no, because there's so many variants to change that excess. And that's why what I tend to do is I tend to say, go to the market, give quotations based on a couple of factors, and then discuss how we can bring it down. So one client might be saying, wow, that's not expensive. Another client in the same age may say, wow, that is expensive. So I say, what I tend to do is I tend to offer a full package policy. And then, because I find it's easy to start with everything and take out and start with nothing and build. And there are so many variants to a policy. So, I'm trying to think what an average. On average, I would, if I had to put my finger in the air, I would say probably between $300 and $450 a month.
Thank you. That's really helpful. That just differs, just a ballpark of kind of where people might be thinking. So thank you. But yeah, for those specific questions, people have asked about their pre-existing medical conditions and specific queries like that. We do recommend that you get in touch with Jeremy and his team, who'll be able to help you through your specific questions. Now again, as I mentioned earlier, we've got our international listeners. So hello to those of you in the US, Australia, and Canada today. Can you assist our customers who are outside the UK, Jeremy? Are there any differences for people across the world? If you could just sort of help us with our international listeners, that'd be great.
The process is exactly the same. When we look at an international policy, we're looking at the country from which you're a resident to the country you're moving to. And whether it's the UK, Australia, USA, it makes absolutely no difference at all. The process is exactly the same. So if I do a quote for a client based in Australia, it'll be, okay, country of current residence is Australia, where you're moving to France, and we do a quotation on that basis. It's that simple.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Jeremy. That clarifies that it's the same process for people. Now, customer Wendy, who's listening, has asked a really good question. Obviously, you mentioned there about pre-existing conditions that they might sort of exempt, or you wouldn't be covered for those.
Correct.
How do customers deal with it if they have got a pre-existing condition? Are there sort of ways around it? Are there higher cost, but they could be covered? If they did want to relocate to France, but there was a condition that they were managing, do you have any advice for people who traditionally might have been sort of rejected from a policy because of their condition?
It's a very tricky one. Not really sure how to answer that one, because when you take out a policy, it states that you won't be covered for your pre-existing. So you have to look at what's available, how long it will take to get you registered within the healthcare system, so you can then start applying to the healthcare system to get that medication. Now, we get some clients that if they need medication, will come back to the UK to get it whilst they're applying. That is one way around it. And I've got, I think, 2 recently who are actually doing that. So they're going to France, they're getting their residency, they've taken out an international policy, but for medication, they do come back to the UK. Okay, at the moment, it's not so easy because of COVID, but that's what they have done in the past.
At the point that a customer had then, say they've taken a policy with you, it's been 6 months, they've got their residency, they've been there for their 3 months, and they've decided now that they want to go down the route of using the S1 form.
Yeah.
Does that essentially, to your knowledge, work very similarly once they've signed up to that, work very similarly then to the NHS working here? So effectively they're getting the state cover in France, and that's sort of a similar process and principles to an NHS service here, as far as you're aware?
As far as I'm aware, yes. And then once you've applied to the, once you're on the system, you can then get everything you need, and you can cancel your international policy. You don't need it anymore.
Brilliant.
So the answer is yes.
That's great. Thanks very much. And I think that the last question that's come in, a few people have asked this, and I know it's something that I queried myself. Are the EHIC cards still valid? Do they cover us for anything? Are they usable, long term? Have you got any updated information on that? Because I know there's a bit of uncertainty out there for customers.
I get asked a lot of that question. The card was replaced with the GHIC card, which is the Global Health Insurance card, but it still applies mainly for travel as opposed to permanent. So if you're traveling, going on holiday and you need it, that's when it will kick in, as opposed to permanent long-term stay. So if you are traveling on holiday around Europe, whatever, that is the card you may need. It's not there for once you get your residency.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's really helpful. There are a few questions that have come in from customers today about their specific requirements, questions about medication and things like that. And for anybody that's asked a question specifically that we haven't been able to answer in this forum today, I will make sure that you are connected directly with Jeremy, who'll be able to help you and talk you through the different policies that are available depending on your specific requirements. I just had one question, which I actually think will potentially cover sort of both of you and what you've been talking about, but I think it might be more of a question for you, Catherine. And with the idea that people want to go to France, they want to apply for residency, and then once they've been there 3 months, or had their residency, sorry, for 3 months, they then want to go through the S1 process and go down the state healthcare route. Can you give us an indication how long some of the application processes take, and particularly for the residency permit? Again, I know it will apply to different circumstances, but is there a sort of timeline that people can expect, Catherine?
Sorry, Hannah, is this relating to the time it takes to obtain the residency permit, or the time it takes to enter into the healthcare system and in France?
To acquire the residency permit, because I think the customers are then thinking, how long do they need to take their health insurance out to cover applying for their residency, and then having their residency, adding on 3 months because they need that window. So how long would the application process typically take?
So unfortunately, it does depend on the type of visa you apply for. I'm sorry that's probably not the ideal answer for a concrete answer for right now. But what I can tell you is that for the withdrawal agreement residency permit applications, so that was under the category A that I spoke about earlier, we are seeing that it usually takes, so just the process is when you apply online, you receive automatically a confirmation email saying that your application has been received and is being processed. 6 to 8 weeks later, you are usually issued with an invitation from your local préfecture asking you to come into the préfecture to give your fingerprints. Again, in France, it depends on the region and the préfecture that is managing your application. In Paris, we're seeing that you apply in 1 week, you receive the invitation, you can choose your invitation for the following week. In other regions, it's taking that bit longer, and they are the regions like in Haute-Savoie, where, for example, there are more British nationals living there. So it is taking about on average between 6 and 8 weeks for most regions. What I will say is that we are expecting that with the increased volume of people who will be applying, we are expecting that may be a bit longer. Because we expect that it'll just take, there's more pressure on the different authorities. So while the authorities are saying for the Brexit withdrawal agreement permit that you do have to have it by the 30th of October, once you've applied by the 30th of June, it's in the hands of the authorities by then. So as long as you have your confirmation saying that you submitted, we expect that should be absolutely fine. And then for the other types of permits, for the long stay visitors visa, it can take between kind of 3 to 6 weeks, again, depending on the consulate. And unfortunately with COVID, there's that backlog and it's taking a bit longer.
Thank you. I hope that sort of rounds up and answers that query that we've had from a lot of people today.
Hannah, sorry, can I just say something? From my side, to be able to apply for the visa, if you have to prove that you have medical insurance, from my end, it takes 4 to 5 days max to get the policy put in place. So I've just did one last Saturday. She called me, filled out the application, and I sent her documents yesterday so she could attach them with her visa. So from my end, it's very quick.
Brilliant. That's really helpful, Jeremy. Thank you. And thank you to both for sort of helping to clarify there on that timeline. That's really, really useful. I'm conscious of our time today. I feel like we could chat on for a good couple of hours with all of the queries and the different circumstances and the questions we've had through today. But we will wrap that up for now, because I think we've sort of touched on the majority of the main points there. So thank you to Catherine. Thank you to Jeremy for your really, really valuable and helpful insight today. I will make sure that we connect you all up with Catherine and Jeremy so you can talk about your specific requirements and get your questions answered, and they can help you and put in place the various different policies and visas and processes and things for you. We're going to pop a link on screen now for you to the Your Overseas Home website. On there, we've got details of our future webinars. We've got some sessions over the next couple of weeks about the property buying process, where you can hear from agents and lawyers, mortgage brokers, currency specialists, and things like that. So we really recommend that you sign up for those. We've also got some future sessions covering the financial side of moving. So again, experts on currency, getting your pounds turned into euros, and thinking about your pension requirements and what you might need when you're making your move. So do have a look at the website there. Also on the website, there's links. There will be a link to this session, the recording of this, if you want to pass that on to family and friends, and also recordings of other different sessions that we've done in the past that may be useful for you. We'll be in touch next week, sharing all of the contact information of our wonderful speakers today. So that's all from us today. All that's left to say again is thank you to you all for getting up early on your Saturday morning to listen. Thank you to Catherine and Jeremy for their expertise, and we wish you a very, very happy and successful move to France. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.